Welcome, everybody, to our first session. Our first paper today will be presented by scholar F. Nihan Ketrez, who is a linguist working on Turkish morphosyntax and child language acquisition. She is interested in pet and infant and child-directed speech, in particular address terms and address patterns. As a part of this research, she is studying pet names and sociolinguistic motivations behind them. The paper is titled Anthropomorphism in Puppy and Kitten Names in Holly Webb's Children's Books and Their Translations.
Good morning and also good afternoon. I'll talk about anthropomorphism in puppy and kitten names in Holly Webb's children's books and their translations today. Anthropomorphism is the attribution of human characteristics to non-human beings or objects. It is observed in the pet naming practices as increasing numbers of pet owners count their pets as family members. Pets are dressed like human. They have hair salons, hotels, or they throw birthday parties, and there's a growing market for special pet products today. A growing trend to give human names like Max and Bella to pet or companion animals as a part of this general humanization trend is observed especially in the United States and other Western countries. In a study conducted in the United States, for example, 48% of the dogs and 42% of the cats are observed to have human names. They contrast with other kinds of pets like birds, fish, reptiles, and the horses. Herzog studies the most frequent dogs in dog names in the United States in 2015 and observes that 85% of them were human names. So there's an increasing trend in giving names, human names to pet animals. Herzog also observes that most of the dogs of the US presidents had human names. The dogs of the presidents appointed after World War II were more likely to have human names in line with the general increase in the trend to give human names to pets in the United States. In Germany, we have a similar trend. 60% of the dog names collected in 2011 are anthroponyms. And a similar trend is observed in Sweden and other parts of the world. Among the 20 most popular dog names in Sweden, 12 are found in the list of most popular 100 names given to baby girls. We have a similar trend in the United Kingdom in a study, in a report published in 2020. It was observed that 9 out of 10 names given to pets are shared by newborns in the country. Bella is the most popular dog name in the United Kingdom. It is the second most popular cat name, and it is among the top 100 newborn human names today. Buddy is the only dog name that does not appear among common human names. It is also the other way around. It was reported that the people tend to give a typical dog name or a cat name to their newborn human children as well. So Molly, Pepper, Samson, Lucy kind of names are considered typical, the pet names, and they are observed in human as well. So the line between human name and a pet name seems to be blurred recently. There is also a difference between dogs and cats. It was observed that dogs are more likely to have human names. Many popular cat names are used only for animals, and cat names, for example, collected in Finland and Denmark, show that most cat names are based on their physical properties, the color and the fur structure of the animals. Diminutive names are also common in naming, especially in cats, and cat names are more the variable phonologically and morphologically, and they are more likely to be related to the sounds cats make. So this difference between cat and dog naming practices can be related to the fact that dogs respond to their names more, than cats. They interact with the human more, so they have more human-like characteristics when compared to the cats, and therefore they are considered more human. And that is also reflected in the naming practices. So dogs seem to have more human names than cats in those countries where we have reports. That kind of, the humanization in the pet naming practices are not observed everywhere. For example, Chen reports that Chinese names of dogs and cats do not overlap with the typical human names given to human family members in Taiwan. But they can have English human names or celebrity names. In Ghana, again, pet names and human names are different. Among the Bashkir people living in the Russian Federation, pets cannot be given human names, but they occasionally have Russian human names. In a study that I conducted in Turkey, I observed that Turkish pets are less likely to have human names, especially when they are compared to the trends in the United States and other Western countries. Cats have always had free access to homes in Turkish society. Dogs had a special status, and it was reported that having breed dogs at home is considered a symbol of modernity and Western lifestyle, and is observed only after the 19th century. Although Turkish people love dogs, they do not have a tendency to keep them as pet animals at home. And among the conservative people, keeping dogs at home for pleasure is still not acceptable. A similar treatment of dogs is observed in other countries where the population is mostly Muslim. And I also observed that this kind of a trend, the separation between dogs and the cats, especially, is reflected on the naming practices of dogs. So dogs are less likely to have human names in contrast to the trends in the Western societies, and dogs are observed to have more modern and foreign names. Even when they have human names, they are more modern and the foreign kind of names, while cats are granted more traditional Turkish human names like Leyla. In this study, I asked the following questions. So, do pet naming patterns in children's books reflect the pet naming trends in the society that I just mentioned? And do pets have human names in the children's books as well? And is there a difference between cat and dog naming practices in terms of especially humanization, sharing the human names? And I finally asked the question, are the patterns in the source texts maintained in their translations? And especially when the source text society and the target society are different in terms of pet naming practices, and do they reflect the tendencies in the target society? I focus on the English literature, children's literature written in English, and I looked at the Turkish translations. It is a common practice to change the character names in translations, especially in children's books. This is especially done for pedagogical reasons, so that the names are changed so that children can relate themselves to the characters in the books. The French book series Martin, for example, is translated as Ayşegül in Turkish, which is Ayşegül is a common Turkish name, a typical Turkish name, and the dog in the book is also the name of the dog is also translated as fındık, which is a typical Turkish, the dog name in the literature. So I picked Holly Webb as the author, children's book writer. She's a British author. She has more than 100 books with animal characters. So she's the prominent author with a lot of the similar kind of books. Her animal series, animal stories, is very popular, and they are translated in more than 30 languages. Turkish is one of them. 77 books published between 2006 and 2024 were selected for the present study. They included the series Animal Stories, as well as 5 other books: The Chocolate Dog, The Cat Named Penguin, The Midnight Visitor from the series The Museum Kittens, and the book from the series My Naughty Little Puppy. In the animal stories, we have individuals, the cats and the dogs. In some of the other series, like Museum Kittens, for example, the same group of kittens appear in all the books. So only one book was selected from these kind of series. There are 38 puppy or dog names and 38 kitten and cat names in these 77 books. 20 of these books were translated into Turkish, and in the Turkish translations, there are 13 puppy or dog names and 6 kitten or cat names, and they were selected for analysis. Holly Webb's books were selected especially because the animals and humans and human-animal relationships are depicted realistically in these books. So animals are not personified, or they do not have human attributes. They rather behave like real animals, and they interact with humans just as they would in real life. So in that sense, the characters in Holly Webb's books are very special and good for this kind of a study. To determine whether a name can be a human name or not in English, the records of the Office of National Statistics that was released on 2022 was used. This record includes the ranks and the counts of baby names for boys and girls separately in England and Wales between the years 1996 and 2021. For the Turkish names, Nişanyan's Dictionary of Names was used, and this dictionary includes the names of the Turkish citizens regardless of their ethnic origin and religion. And it is based on birth records between 1923 and 2022. All the cat names and dog names were selected in these 77 books, and you see on the screen the names of these the pets. The black ones are the ones that appear in the national records, and they are shared by the human. The red names like Buttons, Cookie, Chocolate, Rascal, Penguin, Fluff, these are the names. The red ones are the names that do not appear in the national birth records, so they are only the observed in pets. In these kind of counts, when the same name is used in different books, like Daisy, for example, is one of them, the ones that are marked with star. Daisy, Teddy, Misty kind of names appear in more than one book. But if the characters, the pets are different kinds of pets, different the pets, they are counted separately as different the pets. So Daisy, for example, is counted twice because it appears in 2 different books as different the characters. If the same cat or dog appears as the same cat and dog in different the books, then that they are counted as one single animal. So when we look at these, 72% of the dog or cat names are observed as human names, and 28% are non-human, like Buttons, or the chocolate kind of names. Buttons, Cookie, Chocolate, Pickles, these are the non-human names. And the human names like Harry, Sam, Bella, Molly, these are the 72% of the counts that we have in the data. So the pattern of the pet names are the more human today is observed in the counts of the Holy Webb's books. When we separate the cat and dog names, we have this picture. On the left-hand side, you have the dog names, and on the right-hand side, you have the cat names on the screen. Again, the red ones are the ones that are observed as pet names only, and the black names are the ones that appear in the the birth records in the United Kingdom. As you see on the the left-hand side, there are less red names. That means dogs have more, the human names than, the cats. This is what the counts show. Here you see the cats and dogs, separately. 87% of the dog names are shared by the human, and 58% of the cat names are shared by human. There's a significant difference between these proportions. So dogs are more likely to have, the human names. The next question we asked was whether dogs have more traditional names when they have human names. Do they have more traditional names than cats? Here you see the frequencies of the names that are in the birth records in the United Kingdom. So the dog names are more frequent names than cat names, and that shows that dogs have more traditional kind of names. They are, the older names like Harry or, the Sam and, the Molly, for example. Or when, cats have human names, they are more likely to have more modern or less frequent names like Ginger, for example, or Star or Tiger. So they are human names. They appear in the birth records, but they are less likely. They are less frequent kind of names. So dogs do not only have more human names, they also have more traditional human names. So in summary, if we summarize these results in Holly Webb's animal stories, dogs and cats have more, the human names, 72%. Remember in the report on the society, social trends we saw that 9 of every 10, the dogs had human names. That means 90%. So 72% is smaller in terms of that number, but it still shows that the pattern is the same. So there are more, the human names than, the non-human names in dogs, and the pattern is consistent with the general pattern observed in the United Kingdom. We also observed that dogs are more likely to have human names than cats. So 87% of the dogs had human names, and that contrasted with 58% observed in the cat population. We also saw that dogs have more traditional human names based on the frequency of human names records in the national sources. So let's look at the translations of these books. Here you see the books. 20 of the books, 77 books were translated into Turkish. And here you see in the second column you see the names of the originals in the original texts, and in the last column you see the Turkish names. There are three types of patterns, three types of the translations in the books. The blue lines blue rows shows the ones like Alfie or Harry and Bella that are not translated. So Alfie and Harry, Bella, Max, and Sam are kept as they are in the original book and the translation. And the orange rows show the ones that are translated into Turkish. Like the name Ellie, for example, is translated as fındık, which means hazelnut. And Jess is translated as kıpırdak. And Lucy could be Lucy, but it is not. It was changed and replaced by the word minik, which means tiny. And Oscar, name Oscar, was translated as lekeli, stained. That refers to the physical properties of the actual book in the series. Timmy is translated as caramel. For example, again refers to the color of the original book. In addition to that, there are also three books where the names were translated. Again, buttons, for example, is translated as cacao, again referring to the color of the book. Rascal is translated as haita. This is a direct translation. And chocolate is translated as chocolata, which is again a direct translation. So there are three types of the ways of translations, and the ones that are shown with red arrows here appear in the Turkish name records. So Fındık, Bella, Sam, and Hayta appear in the Turkish birth records, so they can be human names. And other than that, Max, for example, does not appear in the Turkish records. Or Harry, there is no, the human named Harry in Turkey, so that's not counted as a human name because it cannot be given, the human child. And these were the dogs. Now let's look at the cats. As you see, there are only, the orange lines here. Star, Ginger, Misty, and Sky are the human names that are given to cats, and they were translated as Yıldız. So Star and Yıldız are the direct translation. Ginger is translated as Tarçın, which is the same color but a different word. And Misty is translated again directly as Puslu, and Sky is translated as Cloud. Bulut, which is a typical name, both a human name and the pet name in Turkey. And the names Penguin and Fluff, that are non-human names, are translated as the penguin and yumak. Yumak is the rare human name, but it appears in the list. And once again shown with the red arrows are the names that appear in the Turkish name records. And there are no names, cat names that are kept as it is, in contrast to the dog names in the picture. So if you look at the proportions on the left hand side, you see the proportions in the original text that I have already shown. So 72% of the English names were the human names, can be human names in the original text. And in the Turkish, 42% of the names can be human names, and there's a significant difference between these proportions. If we separate the cats and the dog names, on the left hand side you see the dogs. Again, the first column shows the English dog names in Holly Webb's original texts, and it contrasts with the dog names, Turkish dog names in the translations. So 87% of the dog names can be human names in English, and 30% of the names can be human names in the Turkish translations. And this is there's a significant difference between these two material. And here you see the cats. In the English original text, 58% of the cat names can be human names. In the translation, 66% of the cat names can be human names, and there is not a significant difference between them. So in terms of dog names, English text and the translations are different, whereas in the Turkish translations, in the case of the cat names, there is no significant difference between the two versions, English and the Turkish versions. So here you see the the comparison of my earlier findings based on the dog and cat names in the Turkish society, real the names, and in the graph, 30%, the column in the middle shows the translated texts of Holly Webb's books, and on the right hand side of this graph, so the 3%, which is almost alike, is the proportion that I observed in my earlier study in the Turkish social society. So they are almost the same. The pattern is almost the same. Here you see the the similar comparison of the cats. So 66% of the cat names in Holly Webb's books are translated as the human names, and that was the 54% of the the cat names that I collected in Turkish society had the human names. Again, this is a very the similar kind of proportion. So there's a tendency to have the same kind of the proportions in the book, in the literature, and in the actual society. Uh, and our next question was, how traditional the names were. In the case of in the case of the, the English original texts, dogs had more, the traditional human names. We have a contrast here. In the case of the Turkish translations, cats had a higher frequency of human names. The mean frequency as a human name is the higher in the case of the cats when compared to dogs, and this is the contrast we see. So as a summary of the the translations, dogs and cats are less likely to share their names with human names in translations. So in the case of the original text, we have 72% of the the names as the human names, and it contrasts with 42% of the the Turkish texts in translation. Dogs are less likely to have human names than cats in the translations. There is a the 30% versus 66 percent, and dog names in Turkish translations are less likely to be human names than the dog names in the original English versions. There was a clear contrast there. There was no difference observed in the cat names in English and Turkish. In the English texts, cat names were usually referring to the physical properties of the cats rather than they having a traditional human names, and that is also observed in the the Turkish translations. So there was no difference between cats in the English original text and the Turkish translations, although cats and dogs are different in each individual English and Turkish texts. So the pattern observed in Turkish translations is consistent with the general pattern that we observe in the Turkish society, as I report in my earlier study. If we conclude, so anthropomorphism that is reported for the naming practices in the Western society is observed in Holly Webb's children's books. We observed this in the the human versus pet names distributions and proportions, and we also observed that in the the distribution of dog names and cat names, and in terms of the human properties of dog names and cat names. The pet names in the books were translated in a way that reflects the general naming trends in the Turkish society. So societies, social situations may be different in different geographical parts of the world, and it's interesting to see that translations of the books reflect that in a way to to capture that kind of a difference. So what is next? I cannot answer why are some names replaced by the Turkish names, while others are maintained as they are. So that may be an interesting study, a further study in this topic. And it would be also interesting to see whether the translations of Holly Webb's books in other languages have a similar kind of trend. That is, it would be interesting to look at whether they reflect the tendencies in the society in terms of the humanization of the names, or the possible differences between cat naming practices and dog naming practices in those societies. So these are the the two interesting questions that can be answered in future research. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. I will be very happy to answer your questions or hear your comments and the suggestions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that paper. And I'd like to we do have some time because as I mentioned before the session began, we have one the next two papers have been withdrawn, so we can take some extra time for sure to uh, ask and answer some questions. Um, we do have a question in the chat that came up immediately. I'm happy to read through this, and I just want to invite everybody if you wanted to raise your hand and you can unmute your mic and also ask yourself if you'd like. But from Sarah Bunin-Benor writes, nice paper. I wonder if you could distinguish between human
Yes.
names in the target language and human names in the other languages. For example, Max and Harry. Wouldn't Turkish audiences recognize those as English human names? Leibring's work has found the use of borrowed names as pet names, and it might be good to have separate coding for names that are both human names and words with meaning, like Willow and Jet. Also, what you're calling traditional names may be better called frequent names. Thank you very much for this interesting research.
Thank you so much for the question. I actually, when I study the general naming trends in the society, I made this distinction between, human names that are possible human names that can be given to family members in Turkey, and also the names like Max, for example, that can be recognized as a human name, but not the actual name that can be observed in a family. Well, the proportions, of course, when I include these kind of names, also celebrity names, and politician names and these kind of names, the proportions, of course, increase in the category of the human names, but the result doesn't change. So I still have more, the human names in the dog, less human names in the dogs category, and more human names than traditional or frequent names in the cats category. So the result, the general pattern doesn't change. So that was the first part of the question, and I agree that traditional names can be the compared can be replaced by the frequent names. So thank you for that suggestion. I think I answered both of the questions, right? I mean, is there something else? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the question and the response. Any other questions for our presenter? Please, Marianne. Yes.
You mentioned in the background how there is a trend over time increasing human names for real pets. And I wondered if you could see that at all in the fictional names, since Holly Webb's books were published over 20 years. Were there enough to make it possible to see that shift, either in the English or the Turkish versions?
Well, I don't know the English literature, so I'm not familiar with any, the study on that. But I'm right now collecting data for the Turkish literature, and so far, I collected more than 100, the cat names and dog names in Turkish literature, and I see an increasing trend in humanization in the names. I have not, completed the collection of the data yet, but there seems to be that kind of a trend, which is the similar. Still, in Turkish society, they have less human names when compared to American society, but there is still an increasing, the humanization, a similar trend coming a little bit behind, but there is a, the similar trend in the literature, in Turkish literature, as far as I could say.
Thank you.
And there is another question. Is there a research on Turkish pet naming practices, specifically the proportion of human names? I have a study. It has been under review for a while, so hopefully it will be published soon. As far as I know, there is no one else working on Turkish pet names right now.
Cleve, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, I really enjoyed your paper, and I really am interested in the cultural difference, which means that the percentage of dogs and cats who have human names shifts, between Turkey and the United States. So I think that's fascinating. But I also think, although I think in Western countries, most of the thing that's going on is that people are more likely to give pets human names. By looking at your list, it also dawned on me that a little bit of it is the reverse, is that some of the names we're giving humans now are names that in the West used to just be given to pets. And the main one on your list I saw was tiger. I was just amazed that in the United Kingdom there's enough human beings who have tiger as an official first name that now you can list it as a human name. I mean, to
Yes.
me, tiger for a human should just be a nickname. It's just hard for me to believe that there's that
Yeah.
many people who are using it as an official first name for their children now. You
Yeah.
know.
That's amazing. I mean, we have similar kind of trends in Turkey as well. There seems to be, that kind of a changing trend in both directions, I
Mhm.
guess. And Pepper, for example, the contributor to that study, Pepper, is something like the dog's name or cat's name, and she feels comfortable enough to the name the human child with that name. So that's interesting.
We have another question in the chat from Ann Anderson. What are the patterns of naming animal characters in Turkish children's literature? Are animals anthropomorphized in the same way?
I'm collecting that data as well, so I haven't published it yet, but I'm collecting, the characters' names and also human names in the literature. So I will be comparing them. There's an interesting thing, the authors give names to American names or the English names to the animals, and they are human names. But Tony, for example, there is a series, Fox Tony series, and I know the author. I asked her, so why do you call the fox Tony? Why not Hassan or Ahmet or something like that? Apparently, he's Turkish. He lives in Turkish, and then she said because it's a fox. It's not a human. So that was interesting, I think. So an animal can have a human name, but that human name cannot be a human name in Turkey. So it's okay to to give English human names to animals, but not like so. I mean, Turkish people consider it something like an insult to name their dogs or cats after their family members. But it is okay to give foreign human names. So that's an interesting distinction, I think. Yeah. So I will be I'm collecting that data. I will hopefully have a publication soon.
Thanks so much for that insight. I had a question as you were presenting about the identity of the translators themselves, and because you mentioned you spoke to it at least one of the authors, I wonder who are the folks doing the translation, especially for this particular series. Do we know if the original author has any kind of creative say in what the sort of translated names are, or do you know who the identity or what the identity of these translators are?
We know the translators, and I also tried to see whether there is a pattern. So there is, one translator who translates the names and the other one doesn't translate. I could not find any consistency. There are two translators, basically, translated, the most of the books, and they are not consistent in terms of their translations. So there is no pattern in there, but I couldn't have a chance to, to talk to them or contact them about this.
This is as someone who studies names in the ancient world, this is just such wonderful insight to have because we try to identify patterns with some of the
Yep.
ancient scribes that we read
Yep.
of documents that were written about 4,000 years ago, and to hear that you can identify a translator and there's no consistent pattern is just such a really interesting
Yep.
piece of data. Um,
I have the
Thank you.
translation information in the the charts. So
Oh,
between
wonderful.
parentheses, I have the the information there.
Thank you so much. And any other questions? We've got this sort of luxury of time today. for the first session.
I have
Yeah.
a brief question that came up for me during the time, and this may be a simple yes kind of deal, but I was intrigued by the terms of what Brandon was saying about sort of the names here in terms of like say physical attributes and the attributes of the characters. Because I was intrigued that say like Lucy, translated over into tiny, right, or Oscar into stained, and I wondered if that had to do with like the narrative of what was taking place, or if like say Lucy was a tiny cat and thus we did a tiny cat, or was Oscar getting dirty through the book, and then that's why
Yeah.
say that name was being utilized in said way.
It is not, I think, related to the storyline. Oscar was a Dalmatian kind of, the dog. So, I mean, the physical properties of the dog was really like that. So he doesn't become stained over through the story. And, the Lucy was a tiny, the animal. So it is not consistent with the storyline, but it usually refers to the physical properties of the dogs usually. But there is that the general trend, I think, in pet naming practices, that especially in the past when we did not have that many human names, usually the pet names refer to the physical properties or the characteristics or behavior of the animals. We still have that kind of naming practices in horses, for example, or the cows, or that kind of the animals that are not typically pets. Usually the names refer to the color of the kind of the fur they have usually. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you very much to our first presenter, Nihan Ketrez. It was such an excellent paper.